to order. Welcome to meeting number 13 of the House and Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 19, 2020, the committee is commencing its study of the state of the Pacific salmon for the first hour, and the second hour will take place in camera for drafting instructions for a report. Today's meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23, 2020. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I will again outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you normally would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should and must be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are speaking virtually or in person, or participating virtually or in person. I would now, of course, like to welcome our witnesses here today. From the BC Salmon Farmers Association, we have Mr. John Paul Fraser, Executive Director. From the Canadian Fishing Company, we have Phil Young, Vice President, Fisheries and Corporate Affairs. And from the Sport Fishing Institute of British Columbia, we have Mr. Owen Bird, Executive Director. We will now proceed with opening remarks. Mr. Fraser, over to you for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address your committee today. I want to make 3 points, if I can. The first is that BC salmon farmers are a significant economic driver to the agri-food sector in Canada. We are BC's #1 seafood and agri-food export with a total economic output of $1.6 billion. We produce 87,000 metric tons of farmed salmon annually, and that creates about 353 million healthy, carbon-friendly meals. Salmon farming currently supports about 6,000 or over 6,500 full-time jobs in BC, which typically pay about 30% higher than the median wage. Many of these jobs are in rural, coastal, Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities on Northern Vancouver Island. Over 80% of the salmon in BC is harvested in agreement with BC First Nations. 20 First Nations now hold beneficial partnership agreements with BC salmon farming companies. And over the next 30 years, our members project more than 50 additional agreements will be established. The second point I want to make is that salmon farming represents a significant component of Canada's food security. Being designated as an essential service in the early days of the pandemic has allowed BC salmon farmers to help many local businesses ride out the adverse economic impacts. Companies have been able to keep much, not all, of their existing staff, and in some cases, they've even hired additional staff to help manage through the crisis. By continuing their operations, BC salmon farmers have helped to cushion the negative impacts of the pandemic for about 1,700 local vendors in services like fish processing, transportation, technology, boat operations, restaurants, hotels, and other businesses. Since the pandemic, donations of canned farmed salmon to local, regional, and national food banks has exceeded 112,000 pounds of fish. We've been able to provide over 500,000 meals to Canadians in this time of need. And we're ready to do more. Our plan is to support BC's economic recovery, which we have detailed in great detail on our website. So I encourage everyone, if they have a time, to go check that out. My third point is that the salmon farming industry is doing our part for wild salmon through improved management and innovation. We operate in one of the most stringently regulated and transparent food processing industries right now in the world. We adhere to a complex set of regulatory standards administered through the federal and provincial governments. We've been recognized for environmental responsibility. Our industry operates in a manner that's fully compatible with federal and provincial commitments to environmental sustainability. In fact, BC salmon farming has a smaller carbon footprint than any other animal protein producing industry. The largest potential carbon reduction gains for food production lie in the sustainable expansion of marine aquaculture. Since our beginnings on this coast, we've followed an ongoing orderly transition toward greater environmental stewardship by implementing cutting-edge technologies and innovations in the marine environment and on land that support the health of wild Pacific salmon. Our sector is science-driven in every facet of our operation, and collaborative research is paramount in assessing the health of wild Pacific salmon populations in BC and their interaction with salmon farms. At least 10 formal review processes and multiple scientific investigations have concluded that BC salmon farms pose minimal risk to wild Pacific salmon populations. And this fact was confirmed once again in a Fisheries and Oceans news release in September, which the release reported the results of 9 recent scientific studies completed by the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat on the impact of our operations on the health of Pacific salmon in the Discovery Islands. Scientific integrity and transparency are important in advancing the dialogue and dispelling the uncertainties around wild and farm salmon interactions. Strong science focused on seeking answers is essential to moving forward. And communicating that science is just as critical. And we encourage you to check out several of our resources, which we developed over the last year, a performance dashboard, which is a sustainability measure, a deeper dive, which is a library of dealing with often misinformation, and our own technology and innovation report, which we are currently updating. The factors affecting wild salmon are broad and complex. This is a pan-Pacific issue, and we're seeing reports of declines in commercial catches of wild salmon all over the Pacific. Russia has forecast a catch that's down about 36% from last year, and half of that of 2018. Japan has also reported some of the lowest returns in decades in recent years. And closer to home, we're seeing declines of salmon farm species in rivers nowhere near fish farms, including in the Nass region up near Alaska. The government of Canada needs to take a serious, pragmatic approach to addressing wild salmon declines. So in summary, I'll just wrap up. BC salmon farmers are amongst the most sustainable producers of salmon right now in the world. We're supporting communities and families where there are few other opportunities, especially during this crisis. We're growing a sustainable local food product under a robust regulatory framework that is based in science. We're actively engaged in meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and we're operating with less than minimal risk to wild salmon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. We'll now go to Mr. Young for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Phil Young. I'm Vice President, Fisheries Corporate Affairs for Canadian Fishing Company, which is the largest processor of wild salmon in BC. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to address you once again, meet some of the new members. Unfortunately, not in person due to the restrictions, but I do look forward to the opportunity to seeing everyone again. I've been in the seafood business for 35 years, the last 5 with Canadian Fish. Nearly every other company I worked for is gone, and 2 of them were due strictly to consolidation as the salmon and herring resources constricted due to nature and to government policies. Over the years, I've watched the implementation of some of these policies that didn't seem to value an industry, that put food on Canadians' tables in a sustainable and renewable manner. And it really wasn't until COVID hit us in February that the government seemed to finally wake up and designate us as an essential industry. I'm sure that you're going to hear from lots of more qualified witnesses on the biological effects of salmon. So I just wanted to focus my comments more on the impacts on the people that depend on the resource. This current decline in salmon abundance is not the first time it's happened. But this is the first time there's a real fear that it isn't just a cyclical downturn that'll rebound in a few years. Climatic changes, impacts of human activities may be more profound this time, and changes in government policies regarding weak stock management, Indigenous reconciliation, SARA listings, they're all going to result in a completely different salmon fishery in the future. Salmon has been the backbone of the BC fishing industry, and even as the harvest levels decline, it's still an important pillar for our commercial sector. Fishermen, plant workers, companies all depend on the salmon season to round out their incomes. But it's getting harder for all involved to be able to rely on the contribution for salmon. There's only been 1 year in the last 6 that the commercial sector would consider even remotely good. For several years during this stretch, some of the vessels that performed the best were the ones that never incurred any of the upfront costs to get ready to fish and instead stayed tied to the dock. They still had to do minor maintenance and pay their license fees, but at least they didn't have the costs of getting the boat ready to fish, wasting fuel, and then not catching any salmon, or sometimes not even getting an opportunity to put their nets into the water. Indigenous reconciliation is here to stay. What it will look like and how we get to a better place is still uncertain. But from the commercial sector's view, what we need is clarity. Our industry is partnered with Indigenous individuals and bands, but even they're asking for clarity. How can they plan for a future without understanding where an Indigenous commercial harvester is going to fit in the greater plan of treaties, rights, local management? Greater use of traditional knowledge is now in the Fisheries Act, but many in the industry and in the scientific community don't know exactly what it is nor how it will be integrated into our current salmon science programs. Local Indigenous management is great conceptually, but how will it deal with conflicts between the over 100 individual bands from Haida Gwaii to Yale and the myriad of migratory stocks that are going to be affected? Science is the underpinning of this whole discussion, and it's not being done to a level that it should be. Without good stock assessment, how can good harvest decisions be made? We lost our marine stewardship certification for BC salmon due to gaps in science. This lowered our prices this year in the market when really we needed every penny we could get. And science itself needs to be more adaptable. While scientists focus their limited efforts on salmon outmigrations and returns, they're really not doing much out on the high seas where salmon spend most of their lives. There was a program the last few years, independent scientists from the US, Russia, Canada, put together programs to conduct this science with funding from NGOs, salmon industry in Canada and the US, because we see a value and we didn't see governments from all countries stepping forward. Management's going to have to change as well. When there are opportunities to harvest due to unexpected higher returns, reaction has to be quicker. The salmon will be heading into the streams in short order, and DFO has to be in a position to see what's happening on the water and make informed decisions in a timely way to allow the economic benefits to be realized. Just near the end here, licensing is going to be the biggest issue in the short term. We pay very high fees for salmon licenses with very little opportunity to actually fish. This year, the seine sector paid over $1 million in license fees to the government, landed 6.3 million pounds of salmon worth roughly $3.3 million. That means 30% of the total gross value, not what they took home, the gross value of the catch went straight to fees. And at the current harvest rates, the entire salmon fleet is really in a precarious financial position.
Thank you, Mr. Young. We're going well over time. Hopefully, Amy, you didn't get in. It'll come out in the rounds of questioning. But I do know your testimony is available for the members to have. So
you got it.
Certainly have that. We'll now go to Mr. Bird for 5 minutes or less, please.
All right. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to appear before this committee once again. My name is Owen Bird, and I represent the Sport Fishing Institute of BC. I'll take a moment to provide details about our organization, about the values of the sport fishery in British Columbia, and the sector's continued interest to see Pacific salmon regain a state that allows for recovery of stocks of concern and for public fisheries to thrive. The SFI is a nonprofit association that represents the interest of 300,000 licensed tidal water anglers in BC and the hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses that support them. The public fishery and related business produce 1.1 billion in annual sales, directly creating more than 9,000 jobs, according to the most recent provincial studies available. The public fishery is the single largest economic driver of all BC fisheries, even though anglers take only 15% of the annual halibut catch and less than 10% of annual salmon harvest. A broad course of action is required to aid in the recovery of salmon stocks of concern. While the department has provided project funding and studied and explored issues, there is yet to be a comprehensive strategic plan to manage and guide those projects or recovery of stocks. And while there are clearly numerous priorities to be addressed to work towards recovery, such as habitat restoration, enhancement, mitigation of impacts from pinniped predation, there's been a focus primarily on fisheries management. While reductions to access and harvest have now reached the lowest levels possible and in some cases eliminated opportunity entirely, evidence shows that continual ratcheting down of this source of mortality alone is insufficient to positively affect change in the productivity and abundance of salmon stocks of concern. DFO science shows that a less restrictive fisheries management regime paired with aggressive action on habitat predation and environmental change would bring about two significant effects: measurable change and improvement to salmon stock abundance and protection of access to the values and benefits of fisheries to the citizens of British Columbia. Given the department's reliance on fisheries management and with a goal to improve the current state of Pacific salmon, particularly Chinook, it is critical that steps to implement 100% marking of all hatchery Chinook produced in Canada begins as soon as possible. In combination with the 100% mark rates of much more abundant marked Washington State Chinook, BC mass marking of Chinook will provide opportunity to enhance stocks of concern by leaving any of that production unmarked and appearing wild, and allowing certainty and harvest of hatchery stocks. The public fishery capable of selective fishing can have opportunity and access that is now being denied because of the uncertainty of encounters with wild versus hatchery salmon. And among other benefits, wild versus hatchery salmon interactions in streams can be minimized, leading to better hatchery performance. Access restrictions and closures now are exacerbated by a current 10% mark rate of Canadian hatchery Chinook. It's been explained that to move to 100% mass marking of Chinook in Canada, there will be administrative, capital, analytical, and enforcement costs. Knowing the potential for mass marking to benefit enhancement projects and mark selective fishing to provide vitally important opportunities for the public fishery, where currently they are extremely limited or non-existent, the investment is more than warranted and should be made now and to impact plans for the 2021 season. The public fishing community is standing by and has provided viable plans to lend a hand and contribute to efforts to restore stock abundance and access. To properly account for and understand impacts on stocks from fisheries, adequate catch monitoring must be a component. It should be noted that the public fishery, recognizing the challenges and unprecedented effects of the pandemic on regular management activities of the department, have proposed ways to assist with and address catch monitoring gaps created as a result. Utilizing guides, avid anglers, or volunteer anglers participating in sampling projects, and making the STRIF-funded Fishing BC app available as an interim data collection tool have all been offered. Yet to date, incorporating these additional data sources to address pandemic-caused gaps and to allow for increased understanding of catch and collection of data has not occurred. The public fishery is dependent on reliable and predictable opportunity that comes from access to sustainable fisheries. To allow this, the state of specific salmon stocks must be on a road to recovery, and hatchery fish produced should be utilized as intended for harvest. Action and development of a comprehensive plan are urgently required for both the restoration of Pacific salmon stocks that need it and for the social and economic benefits of coastal communities, businesses, and citizens of British Columbia and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Just about 3 seconds over the allowed 5 minutes. So
better than last time.
Almost perfect. Yeah. We'll now go to our questioning, and I will remind members who are asking questions. It would be easier to probably identify who you want to answer the question versus just asking the question and waiting for someone to answer. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'll start out with Mr. Young. Mr. Young, over the past few years, this committee has heard testimony from various classes of harvesters from all regions of Canada. And one common theme that the committee has heard is the factor of access and stable or predictable access to the shared resources of our fisheries. Does DFO provide commercial harvesters with a clear sense of what the committee's or what the government's long-term objectives are and for their efforts to manage the salmon fishery?
Mr. Chair, they haven't, but I think it's very difficult. It's a changing dynamic at all times, Mr. Arnold. And I think that we need some certainty. We do need some certainty, and whether it's an Indigenous allocation, whether it's something that's split, something so that people can make investments, because no licenses really have changed hands on the commercial side in the last 3 years on the salmon seine side. Nobody's buying except for Pictvee.
Okay, the issue of secure access certainly seems to be out there. How would you describe the investment climate of the Pacific commercial salmon fishery?
I did just touch on that. The licenses are not moving. You couldn't go to a bank and get money. We have made deals, and so have other companies, where we've brought in some Indigenous fishermen to become partners with zero down payment, nothing. We've given them a boat and licenses to become partners with us over a 7 to 8 year time frame. We want to bring people in. We all recognize we need young people.
Can you identify why that investment climate might be this bad?
I think the big thing is there is no certainty, Mr. Arnold. There really isn't. We've had very, very poor seasons. We don't know what allocations are going to be. We don't know anything about economic opportunities that are being transferred either inland or coastal to Indigenous communities, treaty rights. We're not involved with those discussions. We just have to deal with the fallout in the end.
Okay, I guess going back to my first question, has DFO or the minister identified what plans or what their objectives are for the fisheries on the West Coast?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware
of. Okay, thank you. I'll go to Mr. Bird now with Sportfish Institute. A couple of weeks ago, Minister Jordan took questions in the chamber debate and seemed to indicate that her department may have finally seen the light and may be moving towards marked selective fishery. Are you aware of any of the status on DFO's assessment of the marked selective fisheries proposal?
Yeah, I understand. I heard those remarks and frankly was encouraged by them to hear that that progress being made. However, the problem is one of timing, and there have been there's a fairly lengthy list of assessment of the applicability and utility of both mass marking 100% of Chinook stocks and marked selective fishing. Very largely through our partners or through our neighbors to the south, pardon me, not partners, but our neighbors to the south. And so there was remarks about assessment done on a river on the northern west coast of Vancouver Island, Canooma River, for example. And while that will provide very interesting results, it doesn't help the situation right now. And it isn't applicable to South Coast fisheries especially well either. So while those remarks were encouraging, we're still very much in a situation where there is a good rationale, a good reason to go ahead with changes for this coming season, and no reason that assessment should hold that up.
Okay, and if a marked selective fishery doesn't happen for 2021, what will the impact be on the public fishery here in BC?
Well, your question of Phil regarding access, I realize is slightly different, but this is what is all important for the public fishery we're talking about opportunities for access in the southern British Columbia coast. Marked selective fisheries present those opportunities because they are a way to avoid stocks of concern, which we understand we must take steps to do that. And so without some sort of regime in place to allow for opportunity to occur for South Coast public fisheries, there is a great amount of peril for communities that are trying to recover from impacts from the pandemic, but also from restrictions that were imposed in the last couple of years. So it is desperately needed.
Thank you. Now to Mr. Fraser. There was decisions to be made at the end of September of 2020 regarding the Discovery Islands and fish farming operations. Do you expect, or did you expect the government to make a decision at that time? And are the salmon farmers being provided a seat at the consultations that were announced on the Discovery Islands?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Well, we did expect a decision in September, and we were heartened with the recommendations coming through the scientific process that after 9 reviews over 9 years, that there was in total a less than minimal risk to the wild salmon migrating through there. That was good, and I think the government acknowledged that. We knew that those licenses were up, those particular licenses in the Discovery Islands were up for renewal by the end of the year. And we know that that process is underway, and it's a government-to-government process, which between the federal government and the Discovery Island area nations, and we fully respect that process.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank everybody for being here. Mr. Fraser, the studies that you mentioned, the reviews were didn't necessarily pass everybody's sniff test in terms of the what was studied, how it was studied, and the conclusions that came out. First of all, who actually did the study, the recent ones that were cited, toward the end of September when the decisions on Discovery Islands were due to be made?
Well, that's conducted through the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat. So that's a panel that is administered through the Government of Canada. My understanding is that half the scientists associated with the Secretariat are with government, and the other half are more or less are outside government, academic community, and elsewhere. And they typically
now, did your organization, did your group fund any of the work that was done? Okay. Now, I understand that the studies themselves weren't agreed to unanimously, that there were some people who questioned some of the findings, others supported them. Do you know what gaps existed there between, the kind of the two sides of the people participating in the study?
I'm not sure that those processes are in camera, I understand, with the scientists and as part of their consultation with one another. So all we know is that when the review is announced, kind of like when a pope is chosen, we all know, and then there is a very detailed analysis that's provided, and it's actually in this case about 300 or 400 pages. So lots of information, and
the smoke comes out of the chimney, and it's yes, I understand that process. Yeah. But now I understand too that the focus of these studies were on viruses, and that a number of individual viruses were studied, but not necessarily the cumulative impact of perhaps the presence of more than one virus in the farms themselves, the operations, and the impact on the wild salmon. And it was my understanding that what wasn't studied at all was sea lice, which is cited by people that you know well, like Alexandra Morton, as being, one of the fundamental issues that will be affecting wild salmon. So now, were sea lice studied as part of this review?
Well, these are good questions that you probably should be asking the department. They conducted the review, but I gather as well that sea lice was not factored as a risk assessment coming through the Cohen Commission, looking at migrating sockeye. However, sea lice is a condition of license, and there are exhaustive studies and reviews ongoing with sea lice. And I think the department, not to paraphrase them, was quite clear about why it wasn't part of this particular review, because it's an ongoing area of research and evaluation.
And an ongoing area of concern, very clearly, right?
Well, it's an ongoing area of concern, absolutely, which is why the companies have invested tremendous amounts of money in new environmentally focused technology to help mitigate the concerns. And the effort is really quite unprecedented right now on the coast.
I have a lot more questions for you, but hopefully I'll get to some. I wanted to talk to a couple of your colleagues there as witnesses. Mr. Young, is the situation that the processors are facing now, these poor seasons that you mentioned that have been kind of the standard for most of the last decade or more, is this due to problems with access to fish, or are there simply not enough fish to go around?
I'd have to say there's a combination, Mr. Hardy. There really is. There are less fish returning, but even when they do return, over 1 million returns to the Skeena, and the commercial sector got to harvest at a 1.2% level. I mean, that is very, very tiny. So sometimes the fish are coming back and we're still not getting access.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Bird, you've focused quite a bit on, the whole issue of hatchery salmon, and we've heard very clearly that, British Columbia, Canada should be doing what they do in Washington State, which is to tag or mark the hatchery salmon. But the purpose of a hatchery isn't to provide fish for people to catch. I thought the purpose of a hatchery was to help rebuild stocks that have been in trouble. Is this your understanding or not?
That's absolutely an element of how hatcheries can function and can aid in enhancement projects, certainly, and actually is a fairly strong argument to move towards 100% marking of hatchery production that is understood not to be related to enhancement.
But does it matter? Does it matter? You catch a fish. If you catch the fish, that fish doesn't get to go and spawn and make more fish. Does it matter if it's hatchery or wild?
Well, so if you've marked all of the fish that you understand are eligible, so to speak, for harvest, and you have other enhancement projects that are hatchery assisted, hatchery enhanced, and you don't mark those fish, then you save those harmless
But this brings a full circle. The purpose of a hatchery is to help rebuild stocks, not necessarily to provide fish for people to catch.
The purpose of a hatchery is, I think, as I understand it, to serve a number of functions. Among those is to enhance stocks, certainly, but it's also in order to provide opportunities for harvest. That's the whole idea, is that you are, Robertson Creek, and on and on it goes. The idea is that you're serving a number of different functions depending on the system that you're dealing with. And so again, if you turn towards 100% marking, then that provides some excellent opportunities to enhance systems that currently don't have any kind of enhancement and may desperately need it, and not mark those fish. And they are treated in all circumstances as wild fish.
Right. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Mr. Hardy.
Okay.
We'll now go to Madam Gill for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to put my first question to Mr. Young, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us. Now, when you talked about the situation, it seems that we're at a crossroads. You were talking about one single good year for salmon over the last 6 years, and you talked about scientific gaps and that management has to change and that the need to have an overall plan in place. So according to you, yes, we talk about having a global plan, but in the short, medium and long term, what are the actions that need to be undertaken by the DFO in order to ensure that we have sustainability of the Pacific salmon fishing operations?
Thank you very much. I think for the most part, we do need the science done, first of all. I think there are long-term things, climatic and everything else, but in the short term, I think we need the science, and we need it to be able to be responsive so that we can harvest the excess amounts and bring the economics. I think the other part is there is no doubt there are too many harvesters on our coast right now. And we need to look at that and decide how we're going to let people retire from the industry with some sort of a dignity and some sort of a retirement plan. so that they can sell their licenses, because there are no buyers right now. So I think there's some short term, medium term, and the long term, hopefully it recovers, and maybe it's ocean ranching like Alaska, and maybe it's other things, but lots of things we can look at.
Peut-être pour continuer avec Monsieur.
Now, to continue with Mr. Young, the study is underway and started when we weren't in the pandemic situation. Do you think the pandemic has accentuated the emergency or the urgency to have an action plan in place?
You know, in fairness, probably not. I don't think that the pandemic, for most of us, I think as we've gone along, being deemed an essential service has been very useful. It allowed us to have our boats out harvesting and bring the fish back in. It was tough in the plants, keeping workers in there. But I think these are longer term issues that we've got to start on now.
Il faut aussi de bonnes nouvelles.
And we need to have good news. So I'm glad to hear that it wasn't so bad for you during the pandemic. And now you also talked about climate change. And of course, I can put this to Mr. Fraser or Mr. Bird or Mr. Young, if you want to perhaps all answer one after the other. You've talked about the DFO and the management plan. It's the government, and we're here in the FOPO committee, but there are other factors. There's the human impact, which of course can damage salmon as well. For example, in certain press articles, there was the question of the oil industry, which has had an impact on certain species. So perhaps if some of you would like to talk about these other anthropogenic factors that are related to the decline of Pacific salmon stocks, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
A bit before I take it just for a second before I turn it over to Mr. Bird. The climatic changes and the human impact changes are real. I think everybody believes that in the river, and especially with something like salmon that have to return to a natal stream. And 1 or 2 degrees in those streams can mean they won't reproduce. So I think there are huge impacts on that. And maybe we don't really understand just how big that is. So, Mr. Bird?
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. That this is where it's so important that an approach is generated that doesn't just focus on one of the priority issues, not just fisheries management or not just project-based approaches to trying to help with restoration, but a more comprehensive view. You note recent issues with regards to oil, and on the West Coast here, there's just a study that was recently published that indicated that oil's offshoot from roads was having an effect on coho salmon specifically, and so there's a lot that we don't know. It does appear that we are learning more about some of these things, and some of them surely must be able to be tackled. But that's again reiterates the importance of an overall and comprehensive plan that tries to tackle each of the priorities.
And I would just add that certainly one of the most comprehensive studies was the Cohen Commission report back in 2012. And Justice Cohen did conclude that there was really no smoking gun, no single stressor sort of responsible for declining stocks. He said there's multiple factors which are contributing to that. Climate change, non-sustainable logging practices, urban development, industrial pollution, overfishing, and a variety of other factors as well. So this is obviously an incredibly complex situation, because as Mr. Young described, you're talking about a very challenging environment through which the salmon have to obviously migrate in order to reproduce.
Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your testimony today and your passion for wild Pacific salmon. Mr. Fraser, you just talked about the Cohen Commission, actually, and I was going to ask a question around Cohen Commission recommendation number 3, where Justice Cohen cited that removing salmon aquaculture products promotion from DFO and their mandate, would create, I think that the feeling is in coastal BC, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in how you feel about it, but around it would create more transparency. And certainly we have conflicting science that we're seeing out there. It's my understanding the industry actually supports this. Can you confirm that? Hello?
Pardon me.
Hello?
I just wanted clarification to your question. The industry supports which?
Recommendation number 3 about removing salmon aquaculture products and the promotion of farm salmon products from the mandate of DFO.
Well, what I would probably want to draw people's attention to is recommendation 19, which said that in relation to the Discovery Islands, which is most pressing and prescient at the moment, is that those farms ought not to be there unless adequate science can demonstrate that they can operate with less than minimal risk, which is exactly what the CSAS process, which was set up by the Cohen Commission to look at those risk factors, concluded.
So again, back to mandate number 3, and the reason I bring it up is that there is a lot of conflicting science, and certainly we've heard that Justice Cohen recommended that it shouldn't, that the promotion of farm salmon shouldn't be under the purvey of DFO, so that DFO could do its role in protecting wild salmon, and that there is some transparency and separation from the department and the salmon farming sector. Do you support Cohen Commission recommendation number 3?
Well, the salmon farming community, both on the West Coast and on the East Coast, has called for and has talked to government for some time about creating, perhaps having a not moving regulators, because we think Fisheries and Oceans is a quality regulator, but probably have a champion, much like all the other food production sectors across Canada. We produce food, we grow food. We're technically not a fishery. So I think that would actually be quite useful.
Okay. I think it would be too. I think it would help industry and those with concerns at least have some separation. You know that obviously the department's been given a mandate, the minister's been given a mandate to remove open net pen salmon farms from coastal BC by 2025. And just recently we heard from the BC First Nations Leadership Council in calling for the immediate revocation of the 18 salmon farm licenses from the Discovery Islands. Obviously this transition to closed containment and land-based aquaculture is coming. What recommendations do you have to ensure that the jobs in your sector, which are important jobs, are protected and that we don't lose that annual economic benefits from your industry? And I do know many of the workers, and I know the impact, and I know they care deeply about our coastal waters, and we don't talk enough about that. And some of the social responsibility companies like Creative Salmon and My Riding that are huge contributors to our community, and I can't say enough about them on the corporate social responsibility side. But knowing this is coming, what can we do and advocate in supports for your sector as you move to closed containment?
Well, thank you, Mr. Johns. I think the commitment actually is not necessarily closed containment. In fact, I don't think you'll find those words in the mandate letter as it's currently drafted. I also think that there is a process in place that the minister has talked about over this 5 years to actually figure out how to actually execute a transition, which can be very, very different. It can even include local ecosystem-based management. And I appreciate the comments you made about Creative Salmon. That's one of the 4 major salmon producing companies that does a lot and cares a lot about the local environment and the local communities. And I would even quote a very important chief who you represent, Mr. Johns, Hashikamas, who is the son of Taiwi Hatwia Makwina in Howsett, who talks about how through my leadership responsibilities, I've taken the time to educate myself on Cermaq's Canada's current practice and believe that salmon farming done well has a role to play in providing economic stability, secure job security, and secure jobs. So you mentioned one Indigenous organization that has opposition. I think we should be really focused on the title and rights holders of those nations who are actually doing it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's objecting to ensuring that the sector continues. I think it's about the mandate is to remove open net pen salmon farms from coastal waters. So, you know, I'll
the
go
mandate,
to
the mandate, Mr. Johns, is to execute a transition.
That's right.
The word removal is not in there.
Okay. Well, let's work together on that. We want to make sure you get enough supports through that transition, and certainly that's something that we're advocating
that would be
for.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. In terms of the, you know, we're hearing, this is maybe a question I'll ask for Mr. Bird. You talked about the marked fishery, and I was at your presentation where we had Washington State present about the cost in investments they made around the marked fishery. Can you talk a little bit about how small of an investment they made compared to the return?
Yeah, I mean, you caught me not having the exact figures in at hand, Gord. I apologize for that. However, I will say that their investment relative to supporting the opportunities for the public fishery and in some instances the commercial fishery far outweighed the benefit versus cost was inordinate. And this is a very similar situation of which we find ourselves now in NBC, and we're along the remarks that I've made in my opening remarks, is that, you know, there are costs necessary to analyze and properly administer mass marking and mark selective fisheries. But in comparison to the values that are in for small communities, economic benefits, social values, they are very, very minor in comparison. I don't have a factor. I apologize for that, but the point is that the costs compared are relatively minimal in comparison.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with Mr. Bird. Mr. Bird, would you agree with the following sentence that salmon hatcheries successfully produce salmon for harvest, stock assessment, and conservation purposes? There's some at this committee that seem to be confused about what hatcheries do. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that, yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's right off the DFO website when it comes to hatcheries. So mark selective fisheries then, and the purpose of a hatchery to create fish for the purpose of catching fish seems to be consistent with producing salmon for harvest. Would you agree?
Again, I would have to agree, yes.
Yep. Tell me about the members of your industry. For the last couple of years, there have been massive closures because DFO has said at the committee numerous times that one of the only tools that they have at their disposal is to shut down seasons or to regulate seasons and withdraw fishing pressure in order to conserve stocks. Do you believe that that's actually true, or could we actually use hatcheries more for enhancement of stocks and provide more opportunities?
Well, as I say, I think the idea behind moving towards 100% marking of hatchery production, not proposing additional production, but just simply marking the 100% of what is produced, would one, provide those additional identifiable fish to be available for harvest, could make a much clearer distinction between wild and hatchery fish than currently exists, and thereby allowing opportunity for harvest in areas where some of those stocks of concern do appear, or it's very clear that those stocks of concern are not present. And the idea behind having opportunity and access for the public fishery is critical. The main areas affected are the south coast of British Columbia by those Chinook restrictions. That's the main population base. It affects perception and understanding about fish and fisheries, and the ability for all number of public fishery participants, whether they're guides or charter operators, those that benefit from fishing tourism, are all affected by opportunity and access. So where possible to provide that opportunity on marked fish, so much the better.
Does the department need to wait for a full cycle of marked salmon in order to open up a marked selective fishery, or could they do it right away?
Absolutely not. They do not, because of our neighbors to the south producing many, many times more marked hatchery Chinook fish, and with an understanding that British Columbians intercept those fish. So there is no problem to harvest those fish. And in addition, there are some marked Chinook in British Columbia waters. So no, there is not a necessity to wait to implement those fisheries.
Can anybody here speak to, maybe Mr. Young, you can as well, Mr. Bird, if it's appropriate, some of the selective fishing techniques that we can use to make sure that we extract marked fish out of the system and leave naturally spawned fish in the system?
I guess I have my mic open, so maybe I'll just jump in, and then Phil, you could go ahead. I think that is one of the. It is a bit unique to the public fishery in that we can readily identify fish at the side of the boat and determine whether that fish has a adipose fin missing or not. And as far as fishing goes, public fisheries are based on one hook, one line, and so it is quite a selective and slow process. So you can make that determination with having little effect on a fish that should be released. So that in combination with data-supported fisheries. What I mean by that is understanding where these stocks of concern are present or not, and allowing for fisheries to take place there will present those opportunities that are desperately needed and reasonable.
Mr. Young, do you have a moment?
Yes, just from my standpoint, I think the big thing is that we do have some fisheries that can be very selective. And the one that comes to mind, of course, is the seine fishery, because you're bringing them beside the boat in a net, you're brailing all the fish onto a sorting table. So not specifically to take a run out or a thing, but you can take species. So if there's a steelhead issue or if there's a coho issue, you can release those back into the ocean with hardly any impact at all. So there are some selective, some not so much.
Hey, Chair, I've got some time left. Yes or no? I don't.
Right on the 5-minute mark, Mr. Calkins. You're absolutely perfect in your timing today. We'll now go to finish off with Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. When we look at the situation, and the situation we're looking at here, folks, is not how to, share the fish that are in the water. This is not an argument over who gets to catch the last fish. This is all about trying to expand the number of fish so that there are more fish to do everything that we want those fish to do, which is to procreate, which is to be caught for food and sport and recreation. So when we look at the health of the stocks and the factors that affect the health of those stocks, we have fishing effort, we have predation, we have climate change, water temperature, etc., and we have habitat. Is there anything else? Is there anything else that we need to look at in terms of a 360-degree view of all of the factors that are, possibly behind the fact that a lot of our salmon runs particularly are in dreadful shape right now? Owen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think you've characterized what are some very, very tall orders. Those are the factors that are impacting all of us, the fish, of course, the fish included. And the more that we can also include the social element here, the social and economic considerations given to addressing fisheries issues, I think so much the better. And by that, I mean, we have to take steps to address each of those priorities, but not lose sight of the fact that society, Canadians, citizens of British Columbia and Canada are a part of this ecosystem. And to take steps to eliminate that for those specific runs of stocks, when there is opportunities to harvest more abundant stocks, this is something we shouldn't do. We must try to take advantage of the harvest.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to cut you short because I have more questions, and this, we're rather confined. So I know that you could go on, and we'll probably have that opportunity offline. A second question to you, and then I'll pass both of those questions on to Mr. Young for the time that we have available. Right now, if there's a critique of the DFO, most of their effort is in to manage the fishing effort, and there's not sufficient balance with the other factors that perhaps can be actionable if the resources, et cetera, are there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that is a problem. There's been a very narrow focus on fisheries management rather than a comprehensive strategy that is more than projects.
Right, Mr. Young, can you address both those questions? Hopefully, you can remember the first one.
No, honestly, Mr. Hardy, Owen really summed it up well. Those are the big issues. We all agree those four are really the big issues. I don't think you can add too much to that. And I do agree that it seems the easy one for DFO to deal with is fish management. And because you can see it right in that year, you maybe put more fish on the grounds. So that's what they focus on, and maybe not enough on the overall situation of what's happening in the high seas or what's happening in the spawning grounds. So I agree with Owen.
How am I doing for time, Mr. Chair? 1 minute, okay. Mr. Calkins and I may have slightly different views about the purpose of hatcheries, but I think we're both on the same page when it comes to predation and especially pinnipeds. Mr. Bird, Mr. Young, what would you have us do?
That's a challenging one.
Yeah, that's my answer too.
yeah, of course. I mean, I believe it's an obvious problem. There's a lot of evidence that says that predation by pinnipeds particularly is an issue, and where to start or how to tackle that challenge is difficult. I'm afraid I don't have a silver bullet, other than to say, boy, something needs to be done, and you need to start somewhere. You've had Dr. Carl Walters propose that a focused approach in estuaries would not satisfy results or make results compelling.
Okay, I'll call it for time. Give Mr. Young about 5 seconds.
Sorry, Phil.
Yeah.
Very much the same thing. It's very difficult to deal with it. There are market implications if we're seen in the rest of the world to be going out and somehow culling. So I think we have to be very careful. It has to be a very strategic thing. But is it an issue? Of course it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Thank you to our witnesses for their insightful testimony here this evening. We'll now close off and suspend and leave this meeting and come back into another one so as we're in camera. So I'd ask the members to try and get back as quickly as possible.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We started late. We started late. Are we going to have a chance for can we just have a couple quick questions or?
No.
One question?
No, the time is up. The analysts have asked for a full hour for drafting instructions, so we're gone a couple of minutes over now, even in this little bit talking I'm doing. So let's try and get off and back on again as quickly as possible. And again, thank you to our witnesses for their testimony today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh.